Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure.
So welcome, Isik Tlabar, to the Adventures of Self.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Taylor.
We're already
pronunciation.
Oh, thank you. We're already having fun because I messed up even just saying welcome. So here we are, already having fun and laughing. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I have wanted to have you on the show pretty much since the beginning. And we played a dance. You're very busy. You have lots on, so I'm very grateful that we are creating this space here and now.
Me too. It's so lovely to be on here.
Yeah,
it already feels amazing. So yeah.
And one of the things we spoke about getting into today is connection and curiosity. And we've known each other for, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so. And I think have a very, curious connection, that sense of curious connection with each other as friends, right? Where we've been good friends and seen each other and helped each other in many ways. And I think it just goes to, I don't know, what it is that, I really get this sense of how we have this opportunity to support other people we come across in our life's journey, to really give support, to show what we see in somebody as his or her potential. Any thoughts on that?
Yes.
It's an opening.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, 100%. Because it's I find curiosity is so important. Because imagine if I really feel like the day we stop learning is the day we stop becoming curious, and that applies for ourselves. Imagine you stop being curious about yourself. You go, okay, cool. This is who I'm about now. This is what I'm doing, and that's it. End of the thing. And it goes with other people as well. Imagine this is why I think relationships kind of, this might be a bit of a tangent, go into a bit of a dead end, because you look at someone and you go, I know how you work. I know who you are. I know what you like. I know what you don't like. And then we put people into a box. But actually, those people are always evolving, always growing. And that goes with the clients we support. When we're curious about them, they actually start to become, oh yeah, let me find out more about myself as well. And that goes with friendships, relationships, who we come into contact in, even on a daily life. Even when you're walking down the street, you look at someone and you're like, oh, I'm curious about this person, let me go and talk to them. So it really I find curiosity brings lots of aliveness, lots of living, and truly newness, because you're always looking at everything. We were talking about childlike curiosity, that innocence, a child going, oh, okay, let me find out about this or that. And that, I think, really makes your life so much more fulfilling, so much more worth living,
Yeah, and I recognize in my own life that tendency to try to close things off. I mean, I can recall years or potentially even decades when I really felt myself getting smaller, and I'd already lived the things that I was supposed to live, and life was passing me by, and whatever, my youth was gone, or all these kind of ideas that were concepts, right? And of course they become self-fulfilling in that sense. And relationships, you just brought up the thing around relationships, and it brought to mind some of my own relationships, but also the relationships I see in people that have been together for say decades. And it is see friends or family who have been together for decades, the 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 ones that I see that are sort of working or thriving do have that curiosity and a willingness to let the other person be curious about what's going to happen in his or her life, because I think there is a sense, and I recognize this, where we want to know who somebody is, because then we know what to expect. Because if somebody else, if the other person's curious, well, they may, there's this fear. It's like, well, they might realize that I don't have what they want, that they're going to find something else, and so we kind of create these, sort of like, let's, put a cage around both of us metaphorically, so that neither of us can go anywhere, because there's, some presumed safety in that.
Yeah. And it's almost like it keeps people stuck as well. It keeps people stuck in that place, because it's like, I want to grow, you want to grow, but we're afraid that we might outgrow each other, actually, or we might grow closer together, but you don't know until you actually take that risk. So in some way, I guess this brings in this point now, that being curious and actually go, it's like risky, like it actually requires courage, because you don't know what's going to come out of there. But I often find it's always magic, because you're leaning into that unknown. But if you're, like you said, if you're staying stuck and almost like caged, both yourself and the other person, then it's almost like it's dead. Like you're trying to hold something that's dead, like it's outgrown already, but you're holding to an old version of you, an old version of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I was thinking before we got on today, because as I said, we've known each other for several years, and I've known you go through many iterations.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, just speaking of, because I know you studied architecture, right?
Yeah, I did. Like, what the fuck was that?
Well, whatever, on some level, it's because we were talking sort of about that functional, dysfunctional. There's a part of you that has architectural abilities, right? In how you architect a space. You're very good. You can, for those of us anybody who's watching this, you always have beautiful crafted spaces around you. And I think, the courses, right? The particularly longer courses, programs that you run have a particular architecture to them. I studied law and worked as a lawyer for 5 years. Now, I don't want to be doing that anymore, but I came to appreciate what it provided me along my journey. But I was thinking specifically what I remembered, because we were talking about sort of this curiosity and innocence and play of children, because there was a time when you were working with children. You were working like in playgrounds.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, well done remembering that. So that was before I set up my business, which I'm running now full time. That was 4 or 5 years ago. So that was around the time we were doing the trainings where we both met each other. And I was, from all the intuitions and awareness I got from the training, there was nothing related to architecture. Like not single person said to me, oh yeah, you're meant to do architecture. So it made me go, well, this doesn't give me joy anyway. It's not fulfilling for me. Let me do what I love. I love kids. I love being around kids. Like, I love their playfulness, their joy, and they're just great to be around. Like, I learned so much from them. I decided I'd be a nanny and work in this school part-time. I have no children educational qualification whatsoever, so I thought, oh, I'm not gonna get it, but it happened, and it's like a proper private school. So what I did was basically I would take them to their lunch break, I would play with them, and then go and look after this other girl I was looking after whilst doing my coaching qualification at the side, and to then led to my business. So that was like a transition, which was amazing. Like, I really enjoyed it. And you're so right in what you said about architecture. Like, I'm so happy that I did that, because the way, like, architecture has so many elements to it. There's the initial ideas, and then there's the building of it, and then the drawings, and like you need to think of so many things. And I feel like it's so similar to running a business. It has so many elements to it, and like taking someone as a person and almost like, what's the word, my brain is still sort of like coming back to its normal form. Like you architect them, like you sculpt them into like who they truly are. So I'm really grateful that I got that learning, that education that actually now translates into my business. And remember that quote by Steve Jobs: you can only connect the dots looking backwards. You can't connect them looking forwards. I totally see that, like, as I progress, is actually is making sense and they're coming together. But I can only find that out as I go along.
Yeah, and I think it goes to like what you do with the things that have happened, because I used to feel a lot of regret over things. So I made the wrong decision, I chose the wrong thing, I did the wrong thing, I didn't do the right thing. You know, I was in this kind of sense of that. And I definitely think with the training that we've gotten, and probably other work I've done, to really appreciate, it's like, well, first of all, there's nothing I can do to change the past at all. I mean, maybe there's a time machine that does exist or has existed or will exist. I don't know, but I haven't come across it. So there's nothing I can actually do to change my past, and it's done. It's over. So is there something that I can do with it? Can I learn from it? That's something, you know, we can say, okay, well, what's my learning from that?
Yeah.
And then I think there's a sense that I've come to, you know, I think you're talking about, is to really appreciate what, you know, it's like that is it, almost as if that was exactly what I was supposed to go through to get to this place. So, you know, I really am deeply appreciative of having a law degree, of working at a high level corporate law for 5 years around the world, because it has made me who I am now. And I start to see the ability to connect those dots, to, you know, connect the work we do in creativity and in coaching and consciousness back into the corporate world, for me, for instance.
Absolutely. And you can support those people, because in some way you've like, you speak that language, like you've been there and you can connect with them. I definitely feel that with architecture and working with like parents as well, like, because I know, like I kind of know like what you're experiencing. I'm not a mom, of course, but I can feel, and I can like tune into that. And in some way it kind of broadens your human experience as well. It broadens, you're not just a facilitator or a coach, like you're actually like so many more other things, and it adds to that diversity and that like expansion. Like you become more in some way.
So there's something you mentioned a couple minutes ago I want to come back to, because it goes into the work that you and I have done in creative consciousness, which is that because we are part of a community that has gone through all sorts of iterations, one of the things that, and it goes to when we were talking about in terms of our friendship to begin with, one thing that's really beautiful is we have an opportunity in our work to get reflections, get intuitive reflections and input, and I'd say reflections and input from a broad range of people. And you know, for those listening, I mean, we sort of learn intuitive practices, and we will go through sort of sets of techniques whereby you may be working with somebody. I mean, we used to do them in person, live, and maybe there are still some, but most of it's done online now with the pandemic over the last year and a half. So you may be speaking to somebody, certainly, that you've never met before, and they may now actually be thousands of miles away, and yet you're getting incredibly insightful and often amazingly accurate information about who somebody is, what they've gone through, and what their potential is. And when you start to hear that, when you start to get this insight, this information, this reflection, of course, there's a choice, right? And sometimes we sort of run away from the things that we're meant to do. But there's a part of us that hears something that somebody we've never met before says, what I get about you is, whatever, working with kids, and whatever it is, or doing breath work, or relationship coaching, women to empowerment, and we have this validation or reflection. It's not even a validation, it's a reflection of what's possible for us, and it opens up, goes back to curiosity. It's like, oh, that's interesting, how does this person get this about me?
Yeah, and that I find gives a lot of permission. It gives a lot of, and I've actually, that tuning in that we do in those trainings, like now I offer it as a one-off session. I call it intuitive activation session, and what I do is I tune into people's mission and their magnificence. So like tuning into their greatness, their true nature, their purpose, why they're here for. And one reflection I often get is like, I kind of know this, but the fact that you don't know me and you just tuned into me and told me all these things is actually giving me that extra permission that now I'm actually going to go and do something about it. So like in those tuning ins, we're not really telling anything that person like doesn't know, like, because we know, like we naturally have this feeling of, yeah, like this is what I love, this is what I want to do, but we often might go into our ego, into our minds, and go, oh, I can't do that because I'm not good enough, I can't do that because people won't like me if I do that, or I can't do that because I'll be rejected, and then we tone ourselves down. But actually it's always there, like no matter if we take action on it or not, it's always there, like waiting to come about. And when someone comes in and goes, yeah, this is who you are, mate, you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool, let me actually do something about it.
It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy,
Yeah.
where the top sort of point of the pyramid is to self-actualize.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's this, what you're saying, right? The potential, the opportunity is there in somebody, but whether you create it actually, whether you actualize your potential, that's up to you, right? I mean, somebody, just like somebody could say from very early on, oh, you're an amazing violinist and you should really do this as a profession. And you may say, yeah, but it's really boring and I don't like playing hours and hours of time. And so you may choose whether you continue with that or not, or painting, right? But I think there is something, really in what we do, because when we have all the hangups that we learned and come to, and as an adult, right, it's really interesting you talk about this idea of permission, because there's a part of this, it's like, I'm an adult, but I don't feel I'm allowed
yes
to pursue maybe what I want. And maybe it's like I guess there's often fear of failure, right, that comes in very strongly.
And I think when that fear of failure comes in, we're actually in a little kid, like we're not in our adult version, right? We're almost like little kids in adult bodies. Like we're all like little kids, really. So yeah, like when someone else comes in and goes, yeah, go on, like do this, it's like, oh yeah, okay. And then the permission maybe then helps us step into adults more. And that's totally cool. I think it's absolutely beautiful to get support in the Maslow, the hierarchy of needs, the Maslow's pyramid. I think, wait, I went through this the other day, I can go through it again. The first level is physiological. There's a meme about it. It's like Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is the first one. It's like, no, not physiological, Wi-Fi. So it's physiological, like food, shelter, things like that. And then it's safety. So like security, like having, covering your bases, like paying your bills, actually like feeling safe in your surroundings. And then comes love and belonging. So connection, people around you, support. And then there's self-respect. So like how you see yourself, like who you are, and then self-actualization. So there's actually all these needs that you go through. And sometimes the mistake people do is, I'm only going to do, like they go from 0 to 5. I'm only going to do self-actualized things. But like, are you covering your bases? Are you eating well? Do you have do you feel safe? Do you have people around you that support you? And then the self-actualization naturally happens anyway. It's like you planted a seed and then you're going to the seed. Okay, actualize yourself now. Like, no, you gotta like water it and love it and give all the right like the elements so that it can like flourish, you know? So I think that's also important as well to like we're naturally social beings. Like we need to feel loved and connected. And actually there's a beautiful saying like if you want to see someone to fully become themselves, go and love them as they are, because that's what actually helps someone become more of themselves.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean that sense of like what people want to do, and there's a lot now. I mean, the spiritual and sort of self-actualized world is so much more present, through social media now than it was 10 years ago. And that's, I'm sure that's a beautiful thing, but I think you're right. There are a lot of people who kind of want to go from 0 to 5, and it's kind of saying like telling a seed, it's like, okay, you're a seed today and you need to become a fully grown oak tree tomorrow. But they may not have developed the root system that's actually, the reason an oak tree can stand as big and as magnificent and as large as it is, because it has developed a root system underneath the earth that allows it to stay exactly where it is, to hold it, to feed it, to bring all the nutrients and all that up. And that does take time. It's not to say that, you've got to go through decades, but in a way you kind of already have. I think one of the things that I appreciate that work we did with Natural Success is not to say you have to go through decades of experience, because you have gone through decades of experience. But you can actually come to learn what those decades of experience, like there's a different way of seeing those decades of experience. I guess what I was saying earlier, like I used to have regrets about everything, and now I have this filter of like, well, actually that's helped me. The fact that I spent 5 years working in corporate law and would have to work for 60 hours a week or work 48 hours in a row to get things done, I don't want to do that anymore. But I know I have a sense of discipline, rigor, conscientiousness about getting things done that I can use with my clients, with my business, with whatever it is I need to do at a particular time and place, and to say, okay, this is what that's given me. This is what that experience has given me for what I want to create here and now and tomorrow.
Absolutely. And that gives self-trust in some way. That gives the fact that you've gone through that experience and done all these years is actually, it's like you got your own back. You got your own back and your own experience. And when a challenge rises, you can go, cool, I got this, I've done this. So it's almost like having that backbone of a tree, like very solid. And you can lean back to it going, well, these experiences I had, it wasn't a waste of time. It actually helped me become who I am now. And there are experiences I can lean back to and go to, oh yeah, cool. Okay, great. Let's do this. Like, let's trust this and go for it from that place. And I like what you said about like the roots going down of an oak tree. And that requires patience as well, because you're not seeing the roots, right? You're just seeing, like, you plant a seed and then it might be actually growing underneath, but you're like, come on, like grow now. Where are you? But it's actually happening. It's growing. But just because you're not seeing the results straight away, sometimes that can feel like demoralizing. You might feel, oh, see, I failed. It's not working, blah, blah, blah. But we're not the judge of that timeline as well. And that's why it's so important to like keep your eye on the vision, keep your eye on where do you want to go, whilst taking those little steps and like trusting that, cool, I'm doing what I need to do. I don't know when it's gonna all come about, but I'm trusting that process as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly having an assumption that things are, because I still make mistakes all the time, right?
Yeah,
or screw up, or things don't go my way. But then there's this like assumption. It's like, okay, well, this is here. This showed up for a reason. I created this complete, pile of dog shit and a mess in my life for a reason. right? And so then it's like, okay, so what can I do with this? And but I think I agree that that sense of having an intention about where it is I want to go or what I want to do. I didn't tell you this before. I just flew back to the UK a week or so ago, and I missed my flight. So I missed my flight. I showed up at the airport. I just assumed that my flight was leaving at a particular time. Well, I completely got the time wrong by about 2 hours. And I showed up at the airport 10 minutes after my flight had left.
Oh my God.
And I know that, in a way, like, a year, certainly 5 years ago, I would have been like apoplectic. I would have been really pissed off and angry, and this isn't fair. And this is, and I kind of looked around quickly, and I was like, okay, well, did Isik make me miss my flight? No. Did my mother make me miss my flight? No. It's like Taylor made me miss Taylor's flight. Okay, fine. So that's on me. And then then in that moment, I was like, right. So what's my end result? I mean, everything's changed. Everything's completely changed. I was like, right, okay, I want to get a ticket as soon as possible. Does that mean I have to get a hotel somewhere? Does that mean I have to retake my COVID test to be able to fly? What are all these parameters that start to go on? And also it's like, okay, well, how do I get an extra ticket? I ended up going online. I found an extra flight, but it was leaving in a few hours, and it's not possible to buy tickets online for a flight less than 5 hours before it leaves.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Thanks for that lesson.
Neither did I, as I found out through 3 websites and 3 debit or credit cards.
Oh my God.
And eventually I was like, okay, it's still the real world. So I went back into the airport and found a little office where they sold me a ticket right then and there, got a pink slip that I took up to the desk, and had a little confusion, but eventually it all worked out fine. But, it goes to that sense of, it reminds me when you were speaking, I have a mentor who I first learned intuition from years and years ago. And I was doing some work with her and talking to her about, she was really pushing me, or not pushing me, she was providing a reflection for what was possible for me. And held me in a particular situation where I just was feeling 100% fear about what to do going forward. And she gave me, I think to your point, some advice that I really hold on to. And she said, Taylor, there are no guarantees in life. You are your guarantee.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it still gets gets to me, because it's just it's so true. There are absolutely no guarantees. You are your guarantee. You back yourself. You create your routes. And so even when the tree limb falls off, when you show up 2 hours late to the airport, there's this opportunity. It's like, okay, so what do you do with this?
And in a way, I love what you did there at the airport, because instead of blaming others, you went you accepted it. You acknowledged it, and then you came back to yourself, cool, what do I do from there? And I really like that. I'm gonna write that down somewhere. You are your own guarantee. And in some way it's so true, because then when things go downhill, you look at yourself instead of so this is my ego. When I'm in my ego, I go to others. I go, someone, authority, tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do. And they tell me something, and it's kind of soothing in the moment, but then it's not as satisfying. It's not as true for me, because it's not coming from me. I've literally took someone else's blueprint, trying to apply it to mine, and that's not going to work. But if I'm aware in those moments and I go, okay, let's just take a moment, let's just take a deep breath and come back to myself. What's true? What's my truth? And when I find that and I follow that, it's almost like I found the blueprint that I needed. and no one else can give me that. And that does actually, yeah, that is like trusting yourself. And I'm still learning that, I'm definitely still learning that.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think one of the things I know, I was talking to another friend about this, is, my own ego showed up in that moment, because one of the things that I do is I take myself out. Physically, metaphorically, we've spoken about this on certain occasions, many occasions maybe. And so there is an egoic tendency for me to take myself out, and often it's right at the end of a process, a situation, a project, vacation, relationship, whatever it is. And so, at the end of this long time, it didn't surprise me that all of a sudden, like, something in me showed up, something dysfunctional showed up, decided to create a situation where I showed up at the airport 2 hours late. The really interesting thing is, sort of giving the conceit, my own dysfunction and flaw away even more. I had assumed the flight was at a particular time because I had just remembered something. The day or 2 days before, this is quite funny actually, a day or so before, I got an email from the airline. Their emails, you get like, oh, make sure you plan for this, COVID this, check extra baggage, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of just, stuff, but I had an email, and the subject line, I didn't even read the rest of the email. The subject line said, your flight, and gave the time. And I looked at the time and said, no, that's incorrect. You're basing it on UK time, and I'm in Greece, so it's 2 hours after this. So I actually got a signal from, call it the universe or whatever, that said, oh, by the way, you're about to make a mistake, and here we are to remind you. And I still ignored it.
No, this is wrong. I'm right.
Taylor knows better. Thank you very much, British Airways. I'll do my own thing. Oh, oops! It turns out, and but so there's like this. To me, there's a dysfunction. We're talking about this sort of two sides of things. There's a dysfunctional aspect, because I then created that situation, which certainly caused some anxiety at the time. I mean, I was sort of flustered and frustrated, and particularly after I'm on 3 websites on my phone and trying to book things and using different cards, and everything's being, computer says no, and I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Okay, I'm going to have to find a hotel to do all this stuff. And so there is that, dysfunctional aspect of, gosh, and like, I had it, it was right there. All I had to do was the information was right there.
Yeah.
But in that moment, there's also, goes to that, there's a part of me also that wants that adventure. Well, what am I going to do? Well, what am I going to do with this? Right. And let's rise to the occasion. That's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory because I had to, wasted it, or not wasted, but I certainly spent an extra couple £100, an extra 6 hours of my time. I mean, it could have been much worse. It could have been several £100, and a day or two more. But there is something of, like, I suppose functionally, or just to get to how I want to solve a problem, but because there's this moment, it's like, well, do I either kind of accept the failure and live through that filter, which is, oh, I missed my flight, I had to pay this extra money, this happened, I screwed up, or well, this happened and I learned something, because I can laugh at the fact that I have the opportunity, and then yes, I spent some extra money, but I created a solution very, very quickly, used my resources.
Absolutely. And also, I don't see it as black and white. I don't see it as like, oh, you totally sabotaged and you like fucked it up. Like, maybe that flight you bought later was like actually the flight you were truly meant to be on, and then that unfolded how your life is right now. Like, I'll tell this story actually. So as you know, I recently had COVID. This is my day 11. I'm slowly coming back to life. And like, I was meant to assist at this week-long shadow tantra practitioner training. And I was so excited about it. Like, I was, looking forward to it. It was like definitely me stepping up in my power. And I rarely get ill. I never get ill. Like the last time I was ill was like 3 years ago, and I tested positive the morning of the training. So instead of going and assisting, I had to come back home and rest for like 10 days and do nothing. So when that first unfolded, I went, oh, like I fucked it up, you know, like I definitely like sabotaged it, because my end result was to be there, and there were so many things at stake and so many things happening. But when I look back now, like, cool, yeah, like I didn't created my end result, but I also needed this deep rest. Like I actually needed this slowing down. And now looking back at this 10 days, I go, I'm definitely not going back to the pace of life like I used to live. It was just so unsustainable. And my body just said, no, like I'm not going to do this anymore. So that was the lesson, you know, like I don't always think when we don't get our end results, like who are we to know? Sometimes there's actually a bigger play at game. Like our human little mind goes, oh yeah, no, I failed. But actually, maybe seemingly right now, but in the long term, this is exactly what you needed, but you just don't know that yet.
Yeah, and I think we go through this sense of like maximizing, you know, all this, you know, sort of corporate efficiency and maximizing things and
Yeah.
getting it right and, you know, perfect. And you know, and I think on many levels, macro and micro, we're seeing and becoming more aware of the unnaturalness of that, and the like the I mean, it also, like, it doesn't really have, there's not much room to play with that, right? I mean, we're I think a lot of people are really appreciating the things that you know that don't go as expected. I was going to say
Yeah.
that do go wrong, but that's putting a judgment on it. That don't go as expected, because then it's like, oh, okay, well now, you know, it goes back to, it's like, well, now there's life, right? Now there's something to do. Now I'm curious. It's like, ooh, how am I going to get home? Because there goes my flight. It actually takes me back to, I don't think I think I missed, it may actually be only the second flight I've ever missed in my life. My parents were divorced very, very early, very young, and I used to fly as a young child on my own from my mom to see my father and back again. And neither of them lived in major cities, so I would always have to transfer somewhere. Right. So, you know, my mom would put me on a flight somewhere, and then she would talk to one of the stewards or stewardesses, and they would sort of escort me someplace to the next gate. Right. Because I started doing this at like age 6 or something. Maybe
Cool.
maybe 8, but I feel I was, yeah, relatively young. Anyway, I do remember once I was probably about 11, and I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had like 2 hours between my flights, and I'd been traveling a bit since then. And I found some arcade room at the airport. I was like playing pool or playing video games, and I sort of totally lost track of time. And I went to ran to the gate when it was, you know, like just moments before or after my flight, and I ran up to this gate. I sort of like out of breath, and I said, "I'm here for a flight." And this the person at the gate, really like beautiful dramatic sense of timing, looked at me, looked out the window as his plane was taking off, and said, "Well, there goes your plane."
Say goodbye.
Like as the plane is taking off, and it's like, oh, that's a really good sense of timing you have. And I said, right, can I use your phone? Yeah. But, you know, because it goes, it's like, well, then what are you going to do, right? I mean, because things like that happen all the time. I mean, not that we want to miss flights and pay extra money, but, you know, things don't go as planned all the time. I mean, you know, getting out of bed might not go as planned, and then you got the rest of your day to deal with.
Yeah, and imagine if everything went to planned. Like that would be so boring. Like imagine you, like literally everything you planned plays out, and that's what the ego wants. Like it it's known, cool, I know what I'm doing, this is what's going to happen, which we need that sense of security a little bit, but like we also need that spontaneity and fun and like things not going to plan. And that's the sense of like adventure. I think that's why people love traveling, like going somewhere and then it's all new, everything's new. And I think we don't need to travel to get to that sense of newness, to get to that sense of, you know, that adventure and curiosity. Like it can found anywhere, like in our daily lives. But we also need to create that space. We also need to create that space for newness, like space for like magic to come in and unfold. Like imagine if we fill everything with known, planned things, and there's no space. Like the magic's like, well, I kind of want to come into your life, but you don't have much space here, so I'm just gonna sit in this corner, you know, like there's no space there. So it's important to create that too, you know, like you might like cool, yeah, you might that adventure.
And I think you know, it could be that that's an innate aspect of what it means to be human. I was reading the book The Occult by Colin Wilson, which is a history of occult and magic. And one of the things one of the things he speaks about is how this this opportunity for newness is like it's a necessary part of evolution, right? Because there's a part of us, as you say, there's a part of us that wants or needs to be safe, that needs to know how it is, how it's going to be, security, right? I'd like to know that when I wake up in the morning, right, the sun's still in the same place, that, you know, I'm in the same street, right? You know, there's certain things that we need and want to know, and but the problem is we get lulled into that sense, and then it becomes boring, it becomes stifling, and then there's no need to innovate, there's no need to grow, there's no need to change. And so we're in this sort of constant tension struggle, because if everything were changing all the time, right? If you woke up and it was like you went to bed and you're in, you know, London, and you wake up and you're in Timbuktu, and it's the opposite time of day, and cars are driving upside down in the sky, and
it's like chaos.
You're like, whoa, this is a little too much. Yeah. So we have this, and you know, it could be like this is what actually is necessary for, you know, like genetic mutation and how we evolve, that we have these moments of stasis that then drive us. You know, it's like you said, if everything were exciting, or if everything went to plan all the time, it'd be boring. And I think if everything were exciting all the time, like there'd be no stability, right? There'd be no way to even have any sense. And so we're in this sort of tension of how to be between those two. And one of the things that, you know, we've learned in our work is how to create that sense, like strategically, right? So we actually strategically create moments where we say, yes, things feel pretty safe and solid, and that's good to have, but I'm going to create purposefully, intentionally, you know, and in connection with my heart, not just for the sake of like putting ourselves at risk, but like putting ourselves to some new adventure in our lives, whether that's travel, or whether that's a relationship, or whether that's a business, or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And consciously as well, like knowing that I like the point about if everything was new, that's just like, that would be chaos. And sometimes that could be very addictive as well, like seeking the new experience, the newness, and like always wanting something new, but then it becomes like a dysfunctional thing as well. Like I think everything is great in balance, and that's why structure is so important, like creating a structure where you have your bases covered, you have that sense of cool, like, you know, I know what I'm doing, but there's also making those choices of creating adventure, like choosing something else. Yeah, I really find that it's a balance of both. Also knowing yourself, like when you know yourself, you know how much more can you add in your, you know, current reality as well.
I want to bring in some of the other adventures that you've been on, created for yourself, which go to your business. I mean, you spoke about maybe the newest adventure, because you spoke about assisting in a shadow tantra workshop, and we had one of your colleagues, Alison Pilling, on.
Oh, Ellie,
Yeah,
great.
several episodes ago, talking about shadow
Yeah.
tantra and shadow kink and these concepts that, I mean, I'm sort of fairly adventurous and open to things, and it's quite new to me to sort of think about those and what to do with those, because I don't know, maybe there's an American sort of puritanical kind of sense of like, oh, you can't go there, right? But then having a discussion about, everything's a learning opportunity, and if you go to things with consciousness and openness as adults,
Totally. Yeah.
it's not to say everybody has to try and do everything, but there's a lot out there that is about. Well, I mean, I'm curious, like for me, there's a lot out there that is about learning, but also about healing, about, and whatever you want to make of it.
Yeah. 100%. Like I find like sexuality is such a broad topic. Like there's so much to it in it. Like my journey of conscious sexuality started 6 years ago. And it started with curiosity, actually. It started with, I know there's more to sex than just the physicality of it. I know there's something more to it. I know there's like a spiritual element to it, and I want to explore that because like I feel it's there somewhere, but I don't know exactly how or what. And then I just started searching online yoni massage, which is a genital massage you receive. And I found someone and I started having one-to-one sessions with him. And that was my like introduction to sacred sexuality, to really connect with my body and to listen to my body, connect with my pleasure, and to really enjoy it as well, actually, like another permission there to truly like enjoy my sexual energy and not feel ashamed of it or not feel, judged by it. Because I'm Turkish. I grew up in a Muslim country, and even though I'm from Istanbul, it's a fairly more modern part, but still you're growing up in a systemic, sexual shame, and women are quite oppressed. And, I grew up with the messages of like sex is for men, sex is for men's pleasure, it's not for women. As a woman, you need to please, and blah, 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 all these like sexist things. So for me, it was to go through those conditionings and to come out from the other side and to actually become like a sexually awakened person going for what I love in my sexuality. So yeah, I've gone into tantra. Recently, I'm more going into conscious kink side of things, which is essentially, I'd like to see it as you're going into your shadow, but you're going into your shadow in a conscious way. You're using role play to find out different parts of you so you can integrate them and you can become a much more whole version of you, really. Like I love the psychological aspects of things. And it's definitely an adventure, and it's not for everyone, I would say. It's definitely not for everyone, but if you like the way I look at life, like I want to live fully, like I want to be brave, I want to live fully, and I want to find out all the aspects of myself, like I want to go into all the corners of my consciousness and see what's there. And that requires courage and openness, and be willing to actually find out things you might not like. Also, like to sometimes who we're becoming is not who we actually chose to become. Like it's there, and that's our true nature, and we're like embracing that. So I find that sexuality is it can be such an innate part of us that gives access to more of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to respond to, Aaron. I think the idea around a lot of shadow work, because shadow work is kind of quite popular as a concept these days, and like Jung talked a lot about shadow work, and I think even Freud probably had a sense of this, that what we keep in the shadows, right? What we keep in the shadows is in the dark.
Yeah.
Your in when things are kept in the dark, right? We don't shine a light. We don't actually see them for what they are. And it's not to say, as you say, it's not to say that everything that's in the shadow is good or bad.
Yeah.
But it's just in the shadow, right? It's like, no, we're not we're not going to look at that. We're not allowed to look at it, or we're choosing not to look at it. And this, but also, and I think what Jung specifically spoke about was, what's in the shadow will invariably have a significant impact, pull, gravitational pull, and that can be functional or dysfunctional. And often more dysfunctional, because if we're not aware of a shadow, then it's going to have a sort of an unconscious tug, pull, bias that we're not willing to look at. That we're not able to see what's really happening. Now, I think you're right in how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Does one want to go? Because once you start with something, you realize that in a way there's never really an end. We're completely complex, infinite beings and creatures. So I don't believe you ever really get to a place where you say, okay, cool, I've got it all, sorted out. And it is also interesting. I mean, I think it goes back to the sense of fear, because there is a sense sometimes that the shadow is stronger than I am. So if I look at it, it's going to overtake me, right? The things that I'm worried about, my shadow side of sexuality or power, or whatever the dynamic is. I think particularly with other people, but it can be with oneself as well. There's a fear or an assumption that if I give it energy, if I shine a light on it, then that's going to become bigger than and so it's assumed to be easier just to leave it back at the edge of a cupboard, somewhere in the dark, and just leave it there.
Yeah. And that leaving it there, actually, then you're telling your subconscious mind that has more power over me. So the fact that, okay, we'll leave it there, then it's going to be fine. But this quote by Jung, unless, wait, what did he say? Something like, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Yeah,
exactly.
That one. Yeah, got it. So, like, we're so powerful, and I love this. Do you know the movie Venom? Have you seen Venom? It's like a superhero movie. Like, I love movies like that. And Venom is his darkness. Like, he's this sort of like black icky thing that comes in, and he takes over him, and he's like, oh my god, what's happening? And he fights it a lot. But after a while, he goes, you know what? I'm just going to embrace. Let's work together. And they work together, and they start to like kill the bad guys. So your darkness can actually, like, you can work with it. I'll give an example of this, and this feels a bit vulnerable, but I'll say it. So with conscious kink, you can go into different role plays. You can go into all sorts of role plays. And you said something about going into your shadow, like what you're going to find. I'm finding parts of me that I don't actually like. And they're not nice for me, for my ego. Like, I'm finding them and I'm going, fuck. And at the moment, I'm working with someone, incredible healer, energy healer, coach, person. And he helps me go into my darkness and integrate my darkness on a much deeper level, so that I can be much more in my power. That's the beauty of going into your darkness as well. Like, you integrate, and then you become so much more so much more integrated in your power. And I'm finding parts like that, like masochistic and sadistic. Like, I actually like hurting, and I actually like being hurt. And I like age play and all these things. And in the beginning, I was like, fuck, like I'm usually someone who goes right in the end of the rabbit hole. And even this is for me a bit, I don't know if I can, like, I thought I was a nice person. Like, what the fuck is this, you know? And it doesn't mean I'm not nice. Like, it just means that I have all the spectrum. So one of the, like, the kinks I have now, which I do that with my partner, is the age play. So little girl, daddy role play. And how that plays out is, it's a bit edgy. Should I carry on? I think I'll carry on. It feels good to carry on. So there can be like two sides of it. You can play with it in a light way. You can play with it in a dark way. The light way is like, oh, daddy loves you. Like daddy praises the little girl. And so when my partner does that to me, I love it. Like I love it. It's actually is so good for my body. And there was a part of me judging it, going, this is weird. Like, why do you like this? Why? And we don't know the reason. It can come from my childhood. My dad passed away years ago, and there's a part of me that feels like he was not there emotionally. So the fact that I'm consciously choosing to go into this dynamic where I'm playing out a dad who's there for me is actually very healing for my little girl. And it's also very fun. So that's the light side of it, the loving. And then there comes the dark part where like daddy fucks up the little girl and it goes all like dark. And that can be fun too, to play with. So it's, you know, it can be so healing to go into those parts and consciously play them out, because then it's not a wound you left in the corner or like a dark side you left. You're going there, of course, with someone you trust and you feel safe with, because it's so vulnerable. Like it's such a, like even with my partner now, we've been together for like 4 months and it's so beautiful and connected. It still feels very vulnerable and very like almost edgy, because you're like opening your heart into such a vulnerable part of you, and choosing to go there with someone. Yeah.
Thank you for your vulnerability. I always love that about you, Isik. I really appreciate it. And what comes to me is, in the sense, because I just want to sort of piece this, like put this together for people a bit. There's a sense of like integration, because what you talk about is like, it's not about deciding whether something's right or wrong, in my opinion, but there's something there, right? And so you kind of have a scratch, you itch it, there's something that you choose to explore around, you know, this aspect of conscious kink, and it may make you feel uncomfortable, and you may get to a point where you say, I don't want to do this anymore, and that's cool, that's your prerogative. But I think what's really interesting is this idea around playing out both sides, right? Playing out the light and the dark, because it gets to this realization that we are all things. You know, there are things through our own socialization, culturization, our family, our culture, the country we grew up in, our religion, our schooling, our friends, all these things that give a sense of what it is we are supposed to be. And it's not to disparage. I'm not saying to disparage and call all of those wrong, but there is an opportunity to say, but is it true? Are all these things, or any of these things, true for me? The thing that I learned from my father about, you know, how to treat women, or what I learned from my mother about how to be a good boy, or, you know, whatever it is, it's not to put any blame or judgment onto those people, but there's this opportunity. And I think, you know, this kind of goes to shadow work in general, but I think what you're, you know, even more accurately describing, this opportunity to really look at not even just the shadow, but the light as well, where you're looking at the whole of something to integrate, you know, really is about putting us, or acknowledging the wholeness and the totality, the universal infiniteness others, right? The integrate is like an integer, the number one. It's right. It's not a fraction. It's a whole in and of itself. And we say in our work, like we're connected to everything through all time and space, but we are also all time and space, right? So we have everything within us, and this opportunity to really explore that, to play with that, allows us to see, well, what are we actually capable of? And I really appreciate Jordan Peterson for his work, looking at the shadow side, and talking about how there's an opportunity for everybody to look at, say, the Holocaust, or being in Nazi Germany, and saying, it's very easy for us to say now, oh, I would never do anything like that. I would never be like that. And maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, right? But there's this opportunity to say, but you have it within you, to be a sadistic person, and to take pleasure for whatever reason. Not to say that you choose that, but to recognize that is a potential within you. And as you say, when you can start to look at it from in a very trusting relationship where you can explore that, then that really gives you choice about what you do choose to, where you do choose to put your conscious energy, your focus on yourself, on your relationships, intimate and personal, in your coaching, in your business, all of that.
And it's such a relief, actually. Like, the more I explored these part of me, it felt like, oh, and my friends start saying it as well, you just feel so much more settled in yourself. Like, oh yeah, I am actually. And because we're both like helping others, it's almost like the more we become more of ourselves, then we can hold others through that journey as well. Like you can only take someone the deepest you've gone into yourself, and people feel that, oh, there's something about Taylor that I want to explore this thing. They might not exactly know, but they just get a sense. There was something else I wanted to say and I forgot. So I'm just going to say that. Wait, give me a second. Wait, you're talking about something and it was so good. Like,
anyway, we'll come back.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, cool.
I just want to move on to one other aspect, because you have this like multi-verse of talents that you're like adding to your tool belt and capability, is around breath.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too, because you facilitated lots of breath work. You're now doing naked breathwork workshops, which I think is fascinating. Talk about vulnerability, but also there's a truth, and in that. So I'm really curious, like because there's one thing to do the work yourself, and it's very different to be facilitating it.
Yeah. So I love breath work. Like, so I guide people I guide them in breathwork journeys, which is essentially breathing in and out through the mouth. And it takes you to an altered state of consciousness. Our bodies are so intelligent. So whenever we suppress an emotion, like the emotion doesn't go away, it's still there, but our body puts it somewhere until we feel safe enough to go into it, feel it, and then to let it go. And then we're so much more freer and more expansive and more like ourselves. So it's a great tool, very fast tool to come back to yourself, release anything that you're not, feel your emotions. And I like holding that space as a ritual, like as a journey, like a shamanic journey. And it's like, I love it. Like, I love it so much. I love seeing people like releasing. It's almost like, imagine you're carrying like a big bag on your back, but you don't know you're carrying it. And afterwards you're like, oh, I didn't know I was carrying that. So that's like the very often feedback I get, that they didn't know they were carrying this thing, and then now it's gone. They feel so much lighter. And yeah, for me, like for my own journey, I started doing breathwork when I was 19 in Turkey. It's like massive in Turkey. And I had a lot of like suppressed anger in me. So I wanted to like just get it all out. And it can be very painful to actually consciously choosing to go into those painful places to re-experience it, but now re-experiencing it from choice. Not things are happening to you, but now you're going there, and it can feel very empowering, very liberating. And currently, what I'm doing is I'm getting trained as this is what Ali does as well, sexological body worker. And part of that training, we do processes with nudity, conscious undressing, things like that. And when we were going through the training, I had this idea, oh my God, like imagine doing a naked breath work. Like that would be so fun. So I remember I went to this week-long training called ISTA. It was a very powerful training. And in there was a point where we were just dancing naked, and it wasn't sexual. It felt like children playing, like children just innocent and in their like naked innocence, dancing and playing together. And I wanted to create that environment in breathwork where people are naked. It doesn't necessarily need to be sexual, but it's freeing. It's like an added layer of vulnerability and freedom there. So I held the first one like 3 weeks ago in London, and it was amazing. Like it just felt like, wow, I love this. People felt really safe. And I guided, there's always a choice. It's not like, okay, get naked now. Like everyone's always like, they don't have to get naked if they don't want to. And I'm always guiding that process very gently and, lovingly. But when people feel safe, they naturally want to go there. So, there's that safe environment, and it definitely adds an extra layer of freedom, like an extra layer of, oh my God, I'm just like naked and being seen in who I am. So I'm gonna do them like monthly now in London, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to me, you were talking about the Steve Jobs quote, is how you're connecting dots, right? We talk about that creating is making connections that haven't been made before, and we may spend some period of time learning. We started in this creative consciousness work through Natural Success at the same time, and we may spend some time, some months, or even some years getting a foundation and seemingly doing things quite similar. Like when I first started doing workshops, I was doing pretty derivative workshops that were based on what I had gone through. And in fact, I remember, coaching with William, who started all this, and him giving me a hard time, saying, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" And I felt very self-conscious about not what he said, but about what I was doing. And I said, "Well, I don't feel like I have the confidence to create, and I want to feel comfortable just going through the motions and putting a workshop on for the first time." And that's cool. Like it was what it kind of goes to the roots we talk about. It's like, I needed to set some roots down and in a way almost mimic what I had learned. And after a while, it started to realize like I wasn't really flowing that well. I wasn't enjoying it. People weren't really showing up because the energy is not really there. And then I started creating workshops and retreats and my own work that had a foundation in that, but was my take on it. Really started bringing in my personality, what interested me. Right? So that sense, it's like, you may have a foundation in guiding breath work, but what came to you was, what would happen if I did it? Offered this to be naked through the sexological work. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. And like I think it's very natural when you're creating something in the beginning to like copy people. Like that's how you start, and that's what I did in breathwork as well. Like I was holding, and the way I presented and held the space was like a bit of a copy of the other people I went to, their breathwork journeys. And a year on, so I've been holding breathwork journeys for 4 years now. Like the first year was that, but then the second, third year, I started to bring in more movement, more dance. Like I love dancing. So there was that movement element to it. And I started changing the music to how I want the music to be. And like all these other elements started to come in, and now the nakedness came in. So it's almost like a journey, it's not a straight line, but it happens with like practice, and you hear people's feedback, and then naturally you get an idea, so like I don't think you can go from 0 to genius level 100 in like one day and okay, great, it's created now. It's years of practice and showing up and doing it, and one day you show up and you go, oh, let me do it this way, and then that works great, and then oh, let me do it that way. But you can't get those ideas unless you're doing it, and you have to show up and do it.
Yeah. I mean, like, that 0 to 100. I mean, it's like telling the seed to telling an acorn to become an oak tomorrow. Yeah. And I think people, naturally do that, like, because, we're creating workshops and, structures, coaching structures, group structures, individual structures, retreats, whatever they are. And it's kind of, if you look at, say, an artist, a painter, or a musician, right at the beginning, they're like, oh, okay, let me copy this, let me do this in this style, and eventually you find your own voice in that. Well, we have had quite an adventure and a journey here. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you for your willingness to really open. We feel like we really opened the hood, the lid, on what this means, what the adventure is, what the opportunity is, it's been great to have you on.
Thank you. It was so lovely to chat to you. Like, I think this has been the most fun, and like I got so many ideas now, like the most fun podcast I've been on. Like, it's been so like amazing, like just talking to you as well as a good friend. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Isik.